Rob.
Hello, welcome to Bow Ties Are Sometimes Cool with myself, Ashley, and Ed. Say hello, Ed.
Hi, Ed.
Now, tonight we are joined by the incredibly talented writer, Rob Valentine.
Hello, Rob.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Now, in this show, we're going to be talking about Christopher Eccleston and his portrayal of the Doctor in Doctor Who, and his reprise of the role in the Big Finish productions, which Rob has been very heavily involved in. Now, I'm not the Doctor Who expert by any means. In fact, I'm not really sure I'm an expert in anything particularly. But the good news is the other 50% of this dynamic duo, that is Bow Ties Are Sometimes Cool, is. So Ed will be hosting this evening's proceedings. And we're going to hand over to Ed now to give you a little bit of background on Rob and to then interrogate Rob to within an inch of his life, probably. So, Ed, over to you.
Thanks, Ash. So, yeah, our guest tonight is Rob Valentine, writer for Big Finish Productions. I first became aware of Rob with his story, The Lovecraft Invasion, which he wrote for the Sixth Doctor. And then he had the honour of writing the last story for the Big Finish main range, which was called The End of the Beginning, which was a multi-Doctor story. Ever since then, Rob's name seems to be on every single Big Finish release. Doesn't seem to be a month go by when there's one of his stories coming out. He's also the half of the creative force behind the new Sixth Doctor Hebe and Mel stories, along with Jack Rayner. But today, we're mainly going to concentrate on his story, Station to Station, which he wrote for the Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston. So, Rob, with that in mind, Station to Station, was that a story you pitched yourself or were you asked to write it?
It was one I pitched myself. If I recall, we were just all asked, everyone who they kind of wanted to throw some ideas into the ring, we were just all asked to throw in like 2 or 3 different ideas. It's often the way at Big Finish. Give us 3 ideas and we'll either pick one or, combine them and ask you to do that. And this was just an idea kind of based on like when Doctor Who first came back, and I remember just like drinking in London with friends and then getting on the wrong train home and finding myself at this little station called Wraysbury outside London, which in the daytime it's fine, but in the middle of the night it feels like it's in the middle of nowhere. So I just thought that a provincial railway station would be a good place to get rescued by the Ninth Doctor, and that was that. To be honest, that was kind of the bit of grit at the centre of it, really, and I just built everything else around that.
You've actually alluded to my second question now. So it was always a Ninth Doctor story. It wasn't a generic Doctor story, which then was adapted to a Ninth Doctor story. No,
getting stranded late at railway stations is something I kind of associate with his first series. So it was it felt like it was in a very personal, subjective way. It felt like kind of a Ninth Doctor sort of environment.
So again, you actually almost like you're reading my mind, because I was going to say it's a story is a nice mix of the sort of the uncanny and the familiar. I think Ash and I, when we were doing the Pertwee podcast, said, yeah, that's what we liked about the Pertwee. It was sort of the uncanny and the familiar, like you made an allusion in Day of the Daleks to some metal being mined in North Wales, which is basically where I am. So it makes it familiar. I mean, do you think Eccleston, especially as a Doctor, you've already answered this question really, but does Eccleston, do you think, works better as a Doctor earthbound and in a more familiar situation rather than being sort of away in the stars?
Well, I suppose the fact is that his tenure on television was really earthbound. So, but I'd say maybe not. I think, however, if you are going to set his stories on other worlds, like just as a writer, knowing I'm writing it for an actor called Chris Eccleston, I know what his interests are, and so you kind of if you set something on another planet, I think you want to bring those interests of his and his concerns into the story regardless, but by analogy, because he's when he first got announced as the Doctor, to me it was like, well, that's Chris Eccleston from Cracker and Our Friends in the North and half a dozen different Jimmy McGovern programs. So that's kind of that's the kind of actor he is. I mean even his casting, if you go to Our Friends in the North, it was a real big thing in the mid-noughties of taking these kind of tired and jaded properties and pulling them back, stripping them down, and then casting actors from Our Friends in the North in the lead role. So you've got Chris Eccleston as the Doctor and Daniel Craig as James Bond. It's a really kind of pared down approach And I think Chris Eccleston, my impression is that he is happiest if he can use the platform of the Doctor to talk about stuff that's real, that he kind of feels is important, just on a human social level.
Yeah. And again, you've sort of tapped into the next question before I've asked it, which is quite amazing, this thing. So in concerns and on a human social level, you've got the character of Saffron, who's going home to her parents to give them some important news. And, you know, the news is she's going to come out to her parents and that she's going to get married. I mean, how important was it to you as a writer to have LGBT representation in the story?
It was very important to have some LGBT representation in the story, because really Saffron is sort of me, really, and it's not actually a coming. I didn't want to do a coming out story, so I kind of hint actually that that's kind of the Doctor's assumption, but actually kind of in the lightest way possible suggest that it's not a coming out thing. It's a dangerous family environment situation, which is a little bit different. So I imagine I don't go into it, but the kind of, it's there, but I kind of think she's out to her parents or her mother, but any further kind of interaction could end badly. So and that just kind of fed into the idea of train stations being places you can either, you can go places, you can change your mind and come back, or you can get stranded, or you can go off on completely divergent paths. So the LGBT representation thing was kind of important, but more in just a kind of, I know what it's like to feel lost at a railway station, not just geographically but emotionally. So it just worked as somewhere to get rescued, not just physically, but kind of just get rescued in terms of, having help finding yourself again. So that was kind of, I suppose that was the idea.
You've got the villain as well, the Griminy Gru.
Oh yes, yeah.
You've got that's alludes a lot to sort of fairy tale, childlike goblins, hobgoblins from the stories you got told, as a child. The villain talks in rhyme, and it's really, really unnerving. What was the inspiration behind the Griminy Gru?
I think I think the inspiration was, there were kind of two different parts to it. I think part of it is that Chris Eccleston is an actor who I think is at his happiest if in, Jimmy McGovern docudramas and stuff like that. That's just my assumption. I don't know this. So, but he's a very serious-minded actor. That's kind of my impression of the man. So I thought, well, that is kind of the biggest contrast you could possibly have then, is to have a kind of a villain / monster who is highly operatically arch and fairy tale like. It's because it's the kind of enemy he's the most unlikely Doctor to interact with on that monster's level, but then he does. He plays the monster at its own game. So it's kind of, it just seemed to me that it would be interesting to see Eccleston's Ninth Doctor take a threat like that, which is kind of silly in some ways, but take it seriously. So it was kind of the one half of it, and the other half I think was just kind of, I'd been revisiting Stephen King's It. So
all right, okay,
a sort of kind of a cross between, like Rumpelstiltskin and those sort of folkloric figures, and Pennywise the clown / the transdimensional spider thing that is it from It. So it was lots of different stuff like that without kind of, it wasn't hugely conscious. It was more one of those things it was just a mood I was following, and those kind of things seemed to kind of tick the right boxes.
Going to go on to a bit of the Ninth Doctor now, Christopher Eccleston's characterization.
Oh yeah,
now,
cool.
These stories now, as far as I'm aware, and I haven't had anything definitive on this, are they set before his episode Rose in the TV series, or are they set during some sort of hiatus they had?
My understanding is that they are set before he meets Rose.
I thought so.
Yeah, because I think the idea was just to have really pure adventures with the Ninth Doctor, without any of the baggage of the Time War. I think that was what Chris wanted. I think he just wanted, like, I'm doing Doctor Who on Big Finish now. Can I have a go at just having the Doctor enjoying life and just being a Doctor? So I think that's just, that's what he wanted. So that's kind of what was that's the accommodation. So I don't think it's set in that little margin when he goes outside the TARDIS and comes back. I mean,
that's where I thought it was, but yeah,
that's a place to fit things. But I think the way we're kind of approaching just the writing process is that he has not yet met Rose. However, now that I've said that, I might be wrong. I don't know. I think editorially they're careful not to say, but I just think from Chris's point of view, I think he just can I just write some fun. Sorry, can I just play the Doctor in some adventures where I'm kind of essentially unencumbered and just get to be the Doctor?
And were you at the recording?
I wasn't. I was at the recording via the medium of Clean Feed. So I was sitting right here where I'm now, and I was listening in just because of COVID. Really, I miss the days when we could all commute to the studio and actually get to hang out in the green room. But I got to listen in, and I don't think I said hi to Chris over it, but I largely you keep quiet unless you've got something. There's a vital line reading that has to be done a certain way, or some kind of some idea that the actors are missing or something. But usually you just keep stum.
And again, you've sort of read my mind, but I'm going to turn it on its head a bit. You heard the recording. You're hearing someone saying lines you've written. Did Christopher Eccleston bring anything to a line you'd written which you thought made you think of it in a different sort of way?
I think that happens all the time with writing for recorded media, because when you're writing something that is going to be performed, and as a dramatist, you hope it all is. You have it in your head a certain way, but you also have it in your head an infinite number of ways. It can be different every time you read it, but it's the potential is infinite, and you're not bound to any one reading or interpretation of a line or even the performance of a scene. But it's always a weird thing. Once it's performed, this is, with theatre, it's different every single night. But with recorded media, once an actor has delivered the line and done it a certain way, there's often a feeling of, okay, we are now limited to the specific forever. That's the one way that line is going to be. That's the one way, and with film and TV and stuff, that's the one way that's going to be performed. And then you're fixed and set. And that's what it is from now on. I don't really remember if there was anything specific. It was more a kind of there was one part at the end where he has to give the monster its true name to own it, and what did surprise me was that he delivered that perfectly, first take, with utter conviction, no stumbling, no problems, and with complete respect to potentially very, very silly dialogue. But it's always weird when actors pick the one way your writing is going to be, because it's now no longer infinite. But that's writing for actors.
I mean, from your writing there, I've picked out a line which is almost like, I'd say, a mission statement for the Doctor, in the same way as sort of throw away a gun as a mission statement from the Happiness Patrol. That line you put, never forgetting, hope's always there, absolutely nails what the Doctor's all about. The conversation he's having with Saffron again before he goes to the new one. The conversation with Saffron feels very, very much in keeping with the character we grow to know on TV. It's similar to sort of the conversation he has with a couple about to get married in the church in Father's Day. It's that sort of real life but uncanny at the same time. And really, the question is, this is very much, even though you've got, you say, the monster with the rhyming tick to it. It's very, very much a character-based drama. You said before the story came from you getting trapped on a station, or a fear of being trapped on a station, but did the story come from the characters or vice versa?
It's an interesting one, that I think on this one, I think on this one, the story just kind of worked itself out kind of partly by virtue of the geography of the railway station. So, but sometimes characters do surprise you and take things in a completely different direction. But that often happens very early on in the process. But usually it's not the case. I find that characters will wildly tell the story. It's more surprising things they'll do in the scene that you didn't know they'd do in the scene. So it's usually they'll surprise you with little moments rather than anything big. Sometimes they'll surprise you with big stuff. There's a non-Doctor Who example of this, which I love, in Reservoir Dogs, when Mr. Blonde, in that he's kidnapped the cop, and he comes back to the warehouse where the others are fighting, and the key thing, the thing that surprised Quentin Tarantino writing it, was that when Mr. Blonde turns up, he's got a like a soda in a plastic cup with a straw in it, and suddenly Tarantino realized, oh my God, he went through drive-through with the cop in his boot. He's that mad. And so he wasn't expecting him to do that. So those things happen. I think maybe one of the things was that like when the Doctor goes into the ticket office, which is a staff-only area, I think Saffron surprised me Saffron was probably, because Saffron's very much me. Saffron was kind of, even though it's a life or death situation, it's staff only, we can't go in there. So she's a bit of a stickler for the rules like that. So I think that might have been something it's a thing I might do in that situation. But Saffron's reluctance to break social conventions, even in a life and death situation, was kind of a little thing that surprised me, I think.
We're going to come on to the ending of the story now. So the ending is really, really beautiful, and the defeat of the Gru seems sort of almost incidental. It all seems to be more to me about people getting a second chance to get things right, like the Ninth Doctor thing. Everybody lives, so everyone gets a second chance to do the right thing. You've said before the Big Finish didn't really want to touch the Time War, but was this a conscious reflection of the Doctor's guilt about doing the wrong thing in the Time War? Was it really a self-contained thing with this story?
It was a self-contained thing with this story. It was really just about. But you are right, though. The defeating the monster is a necessary obstacle, but the actual getting out of the situation even though the monster's been defeated, it's not a given, and that's kind of dependent on these people who feel like outcasts and outsiders in one way or another finding a family in each other, and that's what gets them out. And so I think really it was just the Ninth Doctor I think the key to the Ninth Doctor on Big Finish is that and I think this comes from Chris's request about how his vision of the character. He's completely existential. He lives in the moment, so he's not dwelling on the past, or we're not writing him, and he's not playing it like he's suffering from trauma, which you could argue in itself is a form of suffering from trauma. But he's completely living, and he's choosing to live in the moment completely. So that's all to do with him in that situation he's in at the time.
Okay, so what's next for Rob Valentine then? I saw yesterday that you've got the War Doctor set coming out later on this year, but have you got any other projects you can actually tell us about, or is it all under a veil of secrecy?
A few things I'm currently working on under a veil of secrecy, but for Big Finish, the things that have been announced already that I can talk about are, yes, I've written a box set for the War Doctor, played by Jonathan Carley, who is just an incredible actor. So I've written a 3-parter for him, which is coming out in December. And I think also around then, we've got the next Bambera Units box set coming out, which has been a bit of a labour of love for me, Emily Cook, Alfie Shaw, and Scott Hancock over the last, I suppose, year or so. I mean, I'm quite bad at knowing how much time has passed recently. My sense of time is all over the shop. But yeah, so I think a lot of the stuff I've been writing over the last couple of years during the pandemic is kind of starting to all get released now. And I've got another Eric Roberts Master story coming out for the next set. Is coming out October, I think,
Right.
which is that's great fun. I script edited as well, so I've got stories with by Rob Whitelock and Elizabeth Miles on that one. So that's Chase Masterson and Eric Roberts are back as the Master and Vienna Salvatore, and I think that's everything for this year. I've just got I've had a Sixth Doctor story come out just on Tuesday of this week. The second set of the Sixth Doctor adventures, which I haven't heard yet. I haven't heard a lot of these yet. Actually, I've kind of suddenly got a bit of a backlog. But it's one of the things. If you're not there for the recording, and obviously you don't know what the music and sound design is going to be like, you just kind of hope that things are going to turn out for the best.
Well, that's fantastic, guys. That was just an amazing insight into station to station. Fantastic questioning, Ed, and even better answering, Rob. So thanks ever so much for that. So let's go back a step then. So Ed, obviously back in 2005, I expect you were exceptionally excited with Doctor Who coming back. How did you feel at the time?
Well, we'd had so many false dawns. I was bitterly disappointed with the McGann TV movie in the 90s. I thought, to be honest, Paul McGann was wonderful, but I thought the whole thing was a complete misfire. We'd had 4 or 5 years of the Virgin New Adventures, which would push the boundaries what a Doctor Who story could be. And this went back to not even a basic Doctor Who story, just a basic generic sci-fi story. It didn't have any of the charm. So when the new series was announced in 2003, I was a little bit apprehensive. I was hearing the names like Rob alluded to, like Bill Nye, but then the press were being, Paul Daniels, Dale Winton, because it was seen a bit of it still seems a bit of a sort of a joke program. But then you get Eccleston announced. You got Christopher Eccleston. Seriously,
yeah,
he's a proper actor. He's a proper actor that can bring. He can bring in the serious. He can make this program more than its reputation, because he's got such a reputation as an amazing actor. And then you've got Russell T Davies writing it, who'd written, Queer as Folk and Bob and Rose and The Second Coming, which was at the time one of the best things I'd ever seen on television. And I've watched it twice. I don't think I can ever watch it again. It just rips you up too much when you watch it. But this man, who wasn't typical person the press wanted, actually was going to take on the role to lead our program, was something else. And then Russell T Davies, he sort of gave it a grounding in reality, and he gave it a heart and soul that not saying it didn't have it in the past, but it didn't really wear it on its sleeve in the past. It was sort of grounded in Rose's life with her mum and her dad and her boyfriend and on the Powell estate. And it sort of made it more real and relatable, because you were seeing it through the eyes of an ordinary working class family. So it sort of had one foot in science fiction, one foot in kitchen sink drama. And that made something which, like Rob said, was twee, middle class, a bit naff, into something that a family could sit down and get into on a Saturday night. And basically say that one year that Eccleston did was so important to the show, because if that would have failed, we wouldn't be 17 years later having a 60th anniversary and Ncuti Gatwa going to be taking over as the Doctor. It would be one of those that would have come up on, do you remember 2005? Oh, they brought Doctor Who back. It'd be on one of those nostalgia things. Oh, why did they bother? But no, it was almost like lightning in a bottle.
You're very right. It could have ended up like, the remake of Randall and Hopkirk, or, I think in the 90s and early noughties, we got used to lots of like just one-shot sci-fi dramas like Ultraviolet and stuff like that, and it could have been just you're absolutely right, just this 13 episodes of Doctor Who, and a thing that happened that one year.
So for yourself, Rob, as well as a viewer, Ed, obviously we know how you felt back in 2005. So as you were sitting on your sofa, Rob, at home, and the credits came up and you saw Christopher Eccleston, how did you feel?
Struck by the novelty of it. I remember watching the first episode and just being amazed it existed. And I largely enjoyed it on my first viewing. I like it more than I did at the time, but it was more just the being amazed that the BBC had actually gone ahead and made it. But what I do remember, what struck me was how Buffy-like it was, because obviously I think it is thanks to Buffy the Vampire Slayer in many ways that we got Doctor Who back, because Buffy the Vampire Slayer was the smart, intelligent genre TV program that stopped the BBC thinking of genre stuff as, just rubbish and not serious, not worthwhile. So Buffy saved Doctor Who in many ways. So yeah, I was impressed by the fact it was suddenly primetime BBC Saturday night big budget television starring Christopher Eccleston. Yeah, that was my big takeaway, and just that feeling of it's back was quite remarkable.
I think that probably concludes today's show. There's so many things that we could talk about here. We could probably talk for hours and hours about this. So we'll revisit this, I'm sure. Perhaps the story that Rob's written, or non-Doctor Who, as we hear on the grapevine that Rob is a bit of a specialist in many subjects. So perhaps he will join us again in a non-Doctor Who capacity to offer his thoughts on whatever the episode is on. Just going to hand back to Ed now to wrap things up.
Okay, yeah, I just want to thank you, Rob, for coming on and giving us so much of your time and talking about your experience, writing for Big Finish and in particular Christopher Eccleston. We'll put a link in the description as about where people can buy your episodes from Big Finish as well. So we'll do that. I'm still waiting for my vinyl of Back to Earth. I still haven't had it, but it's on the way apparently.
Neither have I. Well, there
no.
You go.
So I'm still waiting for that, but yeah, we'll put a link in the description of where our listeners can have a look at buying the episodes you've written and the ones you've talked about that are coming out in future. But a massive thank you for taking part today.
Oh, bless you! Thank you very much for having me, indeed.